Hi, Zizaran here with another video, and this time we are going to talk about base types and item level. Crafting can be really confusing in this game when you're new, and like, how do you know what the best base type for different things are? Well, I'm gonna tell you. So we'll start off here with, I'm gonna go through a list basically. We're gonna go through the most common base types. We can start with two-handed maces. You can see if we scroll down here, there's like the coronal maul at the bottom. So you can see there's like a couple of columns here. You have damage, attacks per second, crit, or just total DPS. And there are different times to want to use different ones. So obviously we have here like 10% strength. Imperial moles are actually pretty nice now. If for whatever reason you're doing a strength stacking build, that could be really nice. Generally, those are also used on weapons, like the things that make strength worth it. However, it is also the slowest. The one I end up using the most is the coronal maul. And honestly, most of the time for melee, if I'm crafting, I end up using axes. Axes is generally the best thing. I still want to cover maces because some people do like them frequently a lot for like AoE and clear speed, like being able to like get really big earthquakes. But most people would recommend axes, especially for builds that are like bleed, sometimes even with impale, or just for using war cries. And why is that? Well, the axe nodes are really good, and they're also like fairly close together. I'd say the mace damage nodes, they aren't as good, and the maces also have slightly lower damage but have like different utility. Like here we have double stun duration, um area of effect, increased strength, or 5% chance to deal double damage. So TLDR, I would probably use a coronal maul for things like earthquake, without fist of war, or like things where I want to like attack fairly quickly, and imperial maul when you want to attack really slowly. Let's now talk about the most popular two-handed weapon, which is axes. Now, here we have a lot of different ones and different reasons to use them as well. So we can see here the DPS column, and Valax has been like the powerhouse or the most popular one for a very long time. However, for a lot of builds right now, you'll see a lot of people are using the Kurui Chopper. Why is that? Well, for something like Cyclone, Valax becomes really strong, or even actually the Despot Axe. Despot Axe can be really good for like fast attacking builds because it has slightly lower DPS and like not the high like base damage, but very high attack speed. So anything that's like attacking very quickly or stacking a lot of like sources of flat damage, a Despot Axe can actually be pretty good. Flesh Ripper has a really big advantage here with like the 50% crit. So if you are doing a crit build and you're not a Slayer that has like a default crit increase, Flesh Ripper can be really good as well. But let's talk a little bit about the Kurui Chopper and its recent surge in popularity. See how slow it is? It has a 105 attack speed and 162 DPS. So you're doing some really big, chunky hits. So if you're doing Earthquake and Fist of War and you don't want to attack very quickly, or if you're doing, like for example, I have a build now called it's a champion impale ground slam build. For builds like that, this is insane because you kind of only want to attack once every 4 seconds, but then you're also one-hitting bosses every those 4 seconds. So that's very strong, and also a pretty fun playstyle, and that's where you really want to go for a beefy Kurui Chopper. I just made an axe and I think it had something like 550 to 800 damage with the fist. Whereas like a Valax wouldn't be able to get like that high of a roll, but it would be probably easier to get a higher damage per second. So there's a big difference there if you're going for something slow, like maybe Earthquake, and especially with Fist of War, that really encourages you to attack like not all the time. Whereas like Cyclone, or you could use it with Earthquake too, but without Fist of War, where you actually just want to run around and spam. So it completely depends on that. And then we can move down here to we can move to swords. And then again, you see like Exquisite Blade is the one that is used the most. The 50% crit multiplier here is really good. Even though it has lower base damage than a Lion Sword, it does have like the insane 50 crit multi, and generally that is why people play swords. It's because there's so many good crit sword nodes, and that is like very great to pick up on the tree. Very easy to crit with swords. So if you wanted to go swords and like resolute technique, then a lion sword would be really good. However, if you're playing resolute technique, you might as well go axes because the nodes are really good for that. The sword ones are a lot more crit focused. And then you have the infernal sword if you're going an elemental sword. People don't do that a lot, but you know, you could. Let's move over to a website called poedb.tw. This is really, really good because here we can see item levels, and that is very important for crafting. So how does this work and what are item levels? So it depends on the zone you're in. Let's say you're in a 81 map, a map that's 81, which is tier 14. And if you kill a normal white monster in there or open a strong box, that is going to drop item level 81 items. If you kill a blue, they're going to be item level 82. Or if you kill a rare, they're going to be item level 83. And these specifically are some very important roles. So let's specifically look at item levels as it pertains to axes and or like weapons in general, and particularly fist rolls. Look at the different roles here and what are the sort of like different tiers you would try to achieve like at different points in the league. So here we have the hybrid role, which is you can have both a hybrid role and a pure role. And you can see that both the hybrid roles and pure roles have the highest tier, Dictator and Merciless, at item level 83. And there's also weighting here, which shows you, it gives you some sort of reference how rare they are. And I am planning to make a Path of Exile video and a Path of Building explanation video. And we'll like show like how rare each role is on average and stuff like that. And generally, what makes a good physical damage weapon would be having both physical damage and like percentage physical damage and flat physical damage. So if we see here, flaring is item level 77, which is the flat physical damage, and that is fairly important. Once you're going to start sinking a lot of currency into an item, I would try to rush up all the way to 83. These rolls are very important, and while they're rare, it's really it's not great to like keep rolling on something and you just don't have the option for it to even appear. So that like covers item level a little bit. And the way you see the item level is you just hold Alt down on the item and that'll show. And I don't want to like cover like super in-depth crafting in this video because I do have separate videos on that. I just want to talk about bases, items, and item level. All right, so let's talk about bows a little bit. So if you do want to do an attack bow, Harbinger bows are very popular just for its base crit chance, right? It makes it a lot easier to scale your crit, but there are other choices as well. Imperial bows are very popular just because of the 6-link divination card, making it very easy to get 6-link item level 100 Imperial bows. They're very farmable in pretty much every desert area, and they're a fairly great bow. It's got high attack speed, it's got a decent implicit and pretty okay damage. So for a lot of builds can use the Imperial bow. Mariketh bow, a lot of people just want to go fast, and then it is a decent choice. But one of the other most popular bows is the Thicket bow, which is a 1.5 attack speed, and they're very popular, especially builds that are, for example, dexterity stacking and things like that. You just want to get like whenever you're just hitting and getting a lot of flat damage to attacks, then you want to use a Thicket bow and get the highest amount of attack speed possible. And again, with item levels, let's say you're trying to make a dexterity bow. I cannot stress this enough, but it's super important to go make sure that the item you're crafting on, let's say it's a shaper bow, make sure it does have high enough item level. Because there's nothing that sucks more than crafting on an item. You're like, wow, this mod's really rare, dude. I'm not getting it. It's like, what's your item level? 60. Ah, awkward. Claws are a little bit more complicated and very build specific, but honestly all the like Imperial, Terror, and Gemini claws are all used depending on the build. Like sometimes you really want the life and mana on hit, sometimes you only need the life, and sometimes you want to leech a percentage. So it completely depends on the build, and I haven't played that many claw builds. Who the fuck uses daggers anymore? Like no one, right? So let's go over the different dagger types here. So we can see here we have generic daggers, and down here we have rune daggers. What are the difference and when do you use them? So for example, Ambusher and Sai are both used for attack builds. Generally the Ambusher is more popular, but Sai is really good with the block as well. You can see a lot of people doing max attack blocking builds with that. However, daggers, I haven't seen daggers used much lately. But if you were going to do an attack build, especially if you're stacking a lot of flat damage, then Ambusher is really good for that. But now let's talk about rune daggers and the differences between them. So for spells, the most popular one is the Platinum Chris. There used to be reasons to use ones with different attack speed, but not anymore. So yeah, spells, you're using this one just because it has a 50% crit chance. Now, you can see here, if you look on the PoE that the, an ambusher, it can't even roll spell stats. It can't roll spell stats at all unless you force it on with a essence. So an essence of woe on a spell dagger, or sorry, on an attack dagger would still give spell damage, but you couldn't roll, like, for example, plus spell skill gems and stuff like that. So do remember that there is a very big difference in the dagger types right now, and you can see which group they belong to here on the wiki. So let's talk about Sceptres, which got a really, really cool update in Heist, and I'm hoping they're around to stay. But you have a couple of new Sceptres. So first of all, you have Sambar Scepter, which is really good for a lot of like where you're doing direct hits. So for example, let's say you're doing an actual hit fireball or firestorm or something where you're actually hitting, being able to like bypass 6% of the resist just from the implicit. This is actually more than the 40% increased elemental damage here for a lot of things, especially bosses. So Sambar Scepter can be really, really strong for hitting builds. The Void Scepter can be particularly strong for builds that needs elemental damage from, like, ignites or, for example, righteous fire burning and things like that. And they are really, really good. However, there are some new base types and they're very worth talking about. So Alternating Scepter, this gives you Secret of Suffering, which means you can't ignite, chill, freeze, and shock anymore, but you get like Brittle, Sap, and Scorch. Which are like, they modify the, like, for example, fire ailment. So instead of dealing an ignite that does fire damage over time, you're now basically like lowering the enemy resist based on the strength of your hit. So that Alternating Scepter is really, really cool, but there's more as well. We have a Stabilizing Scepter, which grants you Elemental Equilibrium, means that you don't have to path all the way there to actually take it. You have Elemental Equilibrium as if you assign that skill point. And then you also have the Osculating Scepter, which gives you Elemental Overload. So depending on your build, and I've already started using this in some builds, that could save you like 5, maybe even 6 skill points, and it might make, maybe I can remake my entire tree, which is really, really cool. Now, these are generally used for spell things. As you can see, they don't have a lot of physical hit damage on the earlier ones here, and generally Scepters aren't really used for slapping people with. Scepters are particularly good because you can use Vigilant Strike with the Vigil gem to give yourself a 30-second fortifying, which is very, very popular. So there's some really, really good reasons to use different Scepters here. And then we can talk a little bit about item levels as well. Fire damage over time multiplier goes all the way up to 78. That's when you can get the 38 there. And, you have all like the spell damage, fire damage, all those. They go up to 84 is the one you want there. What people do a lot on, like, this is both wands and scepters, but sometimes people will craft on things that are only item level 55 just to have a higher chance at getting +1 spell and +1, one of the other ones, because these are only item level 2 to hit, whereas the oh, and obviously you can't hit +2 socketed melee gems if it's 55. So you basically, the way crafting works there is that you can limit your mod pool, and you don't have a lot of other things you can hit. It's still very, very rare to hit +1 spell mods. It's very rare. So wait, 50 compared to the other mods. Staves are pretty straightforward. Just use an Eclipse Staff for the spellcaster mods. You could use like the Imperial Staff or something to get higher block chance, but generally what the builds would struggle with would be spell block, not attack block. So generally, if you are doing spells and staves, you would be doing an Eclipse Staff. For actually attacking with a staff, there's a little bit more change here. Like, obviously the damage is pretty much similar here on the Maelstrom Staff and the Judgment Staff. However, the Judgment Staff has the spell block, so it's actually fairly reasonable to get max spell block with a Judgment Staff. Now, as for weapons, last but not least, let's cover wands. And there are a lot of different reasons to use a lot of different wands here, both for actually attacking with the wands or for casting or spell slinger. So obviously convoking wands, it's for minions. That's like really, really nice to roll minion ones with, and they can they have a lot more minion modifiers. So generally that is what you want to use for example, Spectres and stuff. Profane Wand is used in a lot of builds as well. It depends a little bit on your build, but sometimes for good clear speed, getting like if you're dual wielding Sceptres, getting 28% increased additional cast speed there can be really, really strong. Again, that depends a little bit, like do I need more damage or do I need cast speed? But for example, something like, well, Winter Orb is a good example in the past where people would very often use Profane Wands, and also like Frost Bolts, like a lot of things feel. Oh, Cracking Lance is another good one, which isn't in the best position right now, but you know, double Profane Wand could be decent for that because you want high cast speed. So, Imbued Wand. This one is generally the best for attacking because of its high attack speed, and also for Spellslinger. So 1.5 attack speed for a lot of Spellslinger builds, that's really nice. It just feels good, even on something like Essence Drain, where it doesn't really matter if you have really high attack speed, but you know, it's really, really good too. It just feels amazing. You slap in some Blood Rage, or you're already using Frenzy to be the trigger. Actually, I still use Blood Rage actually just for even higher attack speed. But yeah, generally that's the one that feels the best there. And it's completely fine to use that for spellcasting. However, an Opal Wand goes all the way up to 42% increased damage. So if you're doing, for example, Essence Drain and you're not spell slinging, but you're, you know, casting Essence Drain, then a lot of people would use an Opal Wand just because of like the 5% increased spell damage that it gets there. It's pretty much like the same item level things as the, you know, if you're doing the attack-based one with physical, then you have the same item levels as a axe. If you are doing spell ones, then yeah, we have all the ones same as the scepter. And also, let's not forget swords. Generally, the jeweled foil is used a large amount because it has such a high like attack speed, really, really good crit multiplier. Sometimes people use a Val Rapier as well, just because it has higher crit, but it is a lot slower. So the most preferred one is definitely the jeweled foil there. 1.6 attack speed is very hard to beat, and you can get it over 2 attack speed. So it's very, very fast. So this was pretty much all the weapons, all the weapon-based types of Path of Exile, and I'll just do a separate video for armors, separate video for jewelry, so they don't end up like super long and people can find what they want easier. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it helped. I might have missed some things. This wasn't a super planned video, but I just wanted to get something out there because I know a lot of people struggle on weapon-based types, when to use them, and a little bit more info on item levels and how they work. So hope you guys enjoy it. Hope it helps. Let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, if you like the content, subscribe on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Try to die less than I do.